Hi everyone, my name is Richard Williams and I'm the artist in residence for horn at Kennesaw State University and also play in the Atlanta Ballet Orchestra and freelance around the city of Atlanta and the region as well. First of all, I hope that you are all safe and well wherever you are. We have all kind of been locked in our homes for a while now. And so instead of meeting in person, I wanted to offer you a little bit of a fundamental session that also includes a bit of a warm-up. And so let's begin. So the first thing I want to talk with you about is kind of what good fundamental sessions entail. And there are some basic elements that I always try to put in my fundamental sessions. The first is I always try to make buzzing part of what I do. I also always make sure that I do some kind of long tones, harmonic series lip slurs, specifically on the F horn. So if you're doing the ones in band where you actually have to change your valves while you play them with the rest of your classmates, we're pitched in such a different key than everyone else. Those are not true harmonic series lip slurs. So I'll show you what I mean by that in a moment. And then scales. And then additionally, any other kind of special techniques or topics that I'm working on at the time. So that could be double tonguing or lip trills or anything else that I might be working on at the time. So let's get started with buzzing. And one of the things that I think old people are really good at doing is telling you what to do, but one of the things I think we're not so hot at doing is actually explaining to you why you do them. So I'm sure you've all had band directors and teachers who tell you how to buzz, and I think it's really important that we really clarify the purpose behind your buzzing before you actually do it, because fundamental sessions / warm-up sessions can be really helpful or actually really detrimental, because whatever you're doing, if you're spending that much time focusing on a specialized topic, you're going to be reinforcing it quite a lot. So we really want to make sure that we're doing it properly. With buzzing, I'm usually listening for two things. The first thing is the quality of the sound in the buzz. And the second thing is actually just the accuracy of the pitch. So when I talk about sound quality, I describe this to my students as kind of having two different parts. The first part is the airiness, or if you just blow through your mouthpiece, you get that kind of wispy sound, versus the actual pitch, or buzziness that happens. And I think any good buzz has a really kind of healthy mixture of those two things. Anytime I kind of skew too far in one direction or the other, that indicates to me that there might be some issues. So a nice mixture of pitch and air might be whereas a sound that might be too far on the airy side of the spectrum you can still hear that there's pitch and there's raspiness from the buzz, but it's mostly really airy. And then if I go on the opposite end of that spectrum and it's mostly just buzz and pitch and there's not a lot of air in the sound, those are kind of indicators to me that something might not be quite right. And really, this is kind of your horn playing super distilled. I want you to think of your horns as giant megaphones, because they really are. And if you're not buzzing exactly what you want to come out here in terms of the quality and also the pitch, then in some way your sound is going to be a little bit diminished on the actual instrument itself. So we get into a lot of shades of gray in terms of how much buzz versus how much air. There are a lot of different preferences regionally as far as the quality of sound and how people where you are might prefer to hear that. But I think most people agree something kind of in the middle of that spectrum is pretty good. Now, the second thing we'll talk about is pitch. And really, we kind of are a little bit forgiving when we start buzzing on the mouthpiece, I think, because we just think, well, this sounds kind of like a dying animal, and this has nothing to do with what's happening on the horn. But actually, we need to be hyper aware of what our pitch is on this so that when we go back to the horn, really all the valves are doing are just locking you onto different harmonic series at any split second when you're changing, so that we get the most in-tune sound. The valves are not really changing the pitch for you, and we can't really get away with very much in terms of pitch inaccuracy, as you know, as horn players, and that starts here. If you haven't done much singing before, I think one of the most critical things that you can do as a brass player is sing and develop your own sense of pitch independence, especially as brass players, but even more so as horn players, because as you know, we lie higher in the harmonic series, meaning that our ability to notch a note exactly where it belongs is much more important than even on other brass instruments where the partials are spaced slightly further apart. So if you don't sing, surprise, you probably do, or you should. And so if you're nervous about that, I recommend you go in your bedroom, close the door, crawl in the closet, put a blanket over your head, whatever you need to do, but put on some music that you know. Put on some music that you like. It could be something that's on the radio, or just a solo that you like. It could be an instrumental solo that doesn't have words, but just sing along. And then, if you're not used to scrutinizing your buzz here, then what you can do is take recordings of solos that you like and try to buzz along with them. Something that you really are certain of the pitch and you know exactly how it sounds. So that could be pop music, it could be something that's written for the horn, whatever it is, but kind of carry that tool over and really start working to scrutinize your pitch in the same way. So the next thing that we'll say is, sometimes when we buzz, we notice that we get a little bit of shakiness in the tone. I'm sure we've all experienced this, and we all kind of work to try to get rid of it. So in terms of creating a more stable buzz, and especially more accuracy with the pitch without the wiggles and the undulations, I think a lot of this has to do with the way that we're using our air. So the first thing that's most important is you've got to be anchoring to something that doesn't wiggle. Your lips are not solid and stable, so we have to do what we call anchoring, and we do this to our bottom teeth, so that the mouthpiece, generally speaking, for most of the instrument is about 60% push versus 40% push. 60% downstairs. It's akin to if you're just like gently leaning against a wall for stability. I'm not pushing or forcing, but the teeth give me something solid to lean against that is not going to wiggle and show up in my sound. So that's thing one. The other thing is, I really think just the mixture between the volume of air and the amount of support that you're using with your embouchure. And generally speaking, especially with young players, I think we tend too far in the embouchure support muscle, feeling like we have this kind of laser-like pinpoint little target that we have to hit in terms of pitch. And actually, I think if you skew it way more in favor of the air volume, then that will be helpful for you in terms of creating a cushion that stabilizes those pitches for sure. So one of the first things that I want to do with you as part of this warm-up, we're going to get more into playing now, is a little exercise that's kind of modified Caruso technique. And I've modified this and put it in a much more manageable register. I like to use it for intonation and also just for buzzing. It's a really great tool for that. So the first thing is I'm going to put my metronome on at quarter note equals 60, and I'm going to start on some pitches that are comfortable. So what we're going to do is we're going to buzz starting on middle C, a 1 octave concert F or C scale. And in order to make sure that my pitch is accurate, what I'm going to do is actually put on a drone. And so I have one of these more antiquated metronomes here, but if you have tonal energy, that app can drone pitches as well as intervals. It can drone a root or the home bass pitch plus a fifth, an untempered fifth, which is really great. If you don't have tonal energy or a tuner at home that produces drones, I recommend tuningdrones.com. That's a free website that has the ability to create those drones. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to buzz 2 half notes and then a whole note, all slurred, and then a whole rest. And then I'm going to move up in pitch center. So I'm going to go by seconds all the way up the scale. So my first note will be C half note, D half note, C whole note, whole rest. Then I do the same pattern, but starting on D. D, E, D, and then E, F, E. You get the point until we've been up the whole octave. So let's do this together. So here's my metronome on 60. Here's my drone. So first things first, let's find our C's together. And now let's try this exercise. So here's 1, 2, ready? D, E, D, ready? E, F, E. And then F, G, F. G, A, G. A, B, A. B, C, B. And then C, D, C. And there you have it. That's a really simple exercise that you can do. So let's do this one more time. We're going to change the pitch center. You can do this with any scale you want. One thing I want you to pay really close attention to is that when you're sliding between these pitches, that you're not notching the notes. So instead of playing this and trying to skip over all of the imperfections and the pitches we don't want in between, what I actually want to do is just slide across them. I refer to this with my students as buzzing sirens. Basically, I want to pretend like everything that I do on the instrument is connected by an invisible thread of air and buzz, so that I never feel like I'm skipping over things, which feels way more dangerous. But everything on the horn is always happening in a fluid motion. It's going to help us be more accurate. So I tell you what, friends, this time, instead of doing the C scale, let's do the D scale. So that's concert G. So I've changed my pitch center. And let's do this on the new scale, paying close attention to the way that we slide between those pitches. So let's find our middle D to start. Here we go, and 2, and ready. Here's E, F sharp. F sharp to G. Good. G to A. Good. sharp. Here's C sharp to D. And then D, E, D. Very nice. And so you might choose to do exercises at the beginning of your fundamental session or your warm-up, where you actually isolate the buzz in this way, or actually even just buzzing the things that you're learning on the horn in the middle of your practice session. It's incredibly helpful as well. The next thing I want to discuss before we move on into additional exercises just has to do with the way that you're breathing. So speaking specifically about how you take the air in and then how you turn the air around and blow it out. So let's start with the intake. And I'm sure many of you have seen this exercise before, where you put your fingers together and you put your fingers on your lips and then you inhale. And as you do that, you're specifically listening for a low kind of ripping whoosh kind of noise as you're doing that. That is the indicator that I'm doing it properly. And it's really easy just to do this and go through the motions and not get it right. So let's identify what makes this work and how it helps you on the horn. So two big things. The first is the shape inside my mouth as I inhale. When I breathe, I need to suck in as much air as I possibly can, as quickly as I can, in a really efficient way. And so in order to do that, I have to make sure I'm the right shape on the inside of my mouth. Otherwise, that air is gonna go directly to the back of my throat, dry it out, and make me cough in the middle of a concert. I know I have had that happen to me before when I was younger, especially. So we do that by shaping the front of the tongue lower in the mouth, like we are saying, oh. We never really manipulate the back part of the tongue. So just the tip is low and oh, and I inhale. And when I do that, it helps the air slide across my tongue rather than going straight to the back of my throat. The second thing is making sure that you're expanding from the right place. And basically, I want you to think about your lungs as though they are balloons. They go down to about where your rib cage ends, and they go up to about your clavicle. And when you inhale, they're just sacs of air that get bigger all the way around. So kind of visualize a balloon. When you do that, and the balloon doesn't really get bigger in one direction. It gets bigger in all directions. And you should allow your ribs to do the exact same thing, which means that when you're trying to take full breaths, if your rib cage is not expanding, then you're definitely trying to keep yourself sort of restricted and confined in some way. And that's where we run into trouble, where we do these little breaths that are up and down on the spine. I jokingly call those the elevator on the spine breath. Now, that doesn't mean that your shoulders can't move when you breathe, as long as your body is moving out of the way of your lungs in all directions, then you should see motion. But I think generally this is more of an expansive kind of outward motion rather than so much up and down like this. So let's try and combine this good breath, and I'll turn sideways so that you can see how my body expands, but specifically pay attention to what happens in this portion of the body and how it kind of moves out away from each other. Do that one more time so you can really see. Let's make sure. And I'm full. That's a really large volume of air. One thing that I sometimes do to my students is I'll put a little pencil on their sternum, and I'll put another pencil on the back part, this is an ink pen, on the back part of their back, and when they inhale, it should feel as though those are slightly moving away from each other, so that you're really expanding in your full potential. Because it is actually that huge volume of air coming in at such the high rate of speed that is going to give you that whooshing, ripping sound that you're looking for. If you're not getting it, check your vowel shape. Make sure you're more open in the front of the tongue and the tip. Then the second thing is make sure that you don't have tension in your neck. So you might put your free hand here and make sure you don't feel any kind of restriction when you breathe. And then make sure that it doesn't feel like you're breathing here. Shallow and deep, but low and out. And that will help you get the good breathing sound. That means you're taking a good breath on the horn. The good news is then you just replace this with your mouthpiece. And you're going to have much better first notes and also feel like you can play longer phrases more successfully. For the last part of our breathing chat, let's talk about how you know if you're using enough air when you're playing the horn. And until you're used to how that sounds actually on the instrument and also how it feels, there are some really cool tools that we have to measure that. So the first one that I'll draw your attention to is called an incentive spirometer. And this specifically is called the Portex Inspiron incentive spirometer. It's about $20. And we use this by turning it upside down. And you'll notice there are two holes that you never want to cover. There's also a dial on the front that, especially if it's your first time doing this, I'll just put it on 0 all the way closed. The more open, the higher the number, and the more difficult it is. But generally, most people find that 0 is a good place to start, especially if you're new. Then you can put your mouthpiece here. You got to make sure that you make a good seal there. By the way, you can trim this. It doesn't really have any bearing on how this actually functions. And just as you suspect by looking at it, when you blow, the ball indicates if enough air is flowing through. So you can buzz. And when you do that, you basically just want the ball to live on the ceiling anytime you're making a sound. As you get better at doing it, then you want to be more and more specific by watching the ball. And from the moment you start making any kind of a sound or blowing, you want the ball immediately to hit the ceiling. So whether it's your first note, or whether you're tonguing on the airstream, or whether you are suspending your air to tongue, as soon as I articulate, I want to actually pretend a little bit like this is a percussion instrument, and the ball needs to smack the ceiling exactly when I want it to speak on the horn. Otherwise, I'm going to get articulations that in some way would be a little bit sloppy. So I'll show you what that looks like. Or the immediacy with which the ball hits the ceiling is a pretty good indicator of what kind of an articulation I'm going to get on the horn. So that's a good tool. Another good tool is flutter tonguing, which is basically just the same thing as trilling your R's in Spanish, which, by the way, is not hereditary. It's something you can learn. And if you can't do it, I encourage you to practice and see what you can figure out. For me, I put the tip of my tongue kind of on the ridge just before I get into the dome part of my mouth, and I blow air right at it, being really careful not to let it leak around the side. When I play things on the horn, and I practice this way, I don't re-articulate every note. I actually just kind of slur everything and keep the flutter going. The looser the flutter, usually the better the quality of the air, as opposed to tighter and faster. So I want this and not. The tighter one usually indicates that you're not using enough air or there's some tension. So as loose and big and airy as that can sound will be really good. The last thing we want to do is talk about where your support comes from in your body while you play. That's kind of a little bit of a mystery. One of the things that's helped me over the years is just trying to use these systems that are natural to my body, that I automatically know how to do in order to play the horn. As we all know, playing musical instruments is not a natural thing. It's something that is very contrived and learned. So the more we can tap into these natural sort of things that we know how to do already, the better it's going to be. So when I play, the best way to feel your support, I think, is just to take a balloon and blow it up. And while you're blowing up the balloon, when you feel that resistance, I want you to notice specifically what you're doing in your bottom. You're going to feel a little bit of a nudge down into your seat, which kind of makes your stomach come forward just a little bit. It's a kind of a down and out feeling. And I use this especially like when I'm suspending my air, or when I'm in the high register, or if I have to play something super loud. Now, Arnold Jacobs was very clear that he doesn't really want you to use this very much, but he was playing a tuba that had a gigantic bore on it with very little resistance, whereas on instruments like trumpet and horn, we do have a little bit more resistance. So the key is, I don't think we should use this more than we have to, because if you are really forcing all the time, you can actually cause some medical problems for yourself and give yourself a hernia, and nobody wants to deal with that. So you have to use it judiciously and efficiently, but that is where the feeling of support comes from. Rather than, I sometimes hear people talk about squeezing with their abs, like their belly buttons going towards their spine. And what's really weird is if you look at my neck when I do that, you can see that like tensing up. And that's actually some residual tension from doing that. But with sort of the down and out motion, we don't get that at all. So be very careful with that. That is one thing that we can do. So now that we've talked about how to take the air in, we've talked about how to blow the air out, let's play some long tones. Let's move on to the actual long tone exercise. The whole point of long tones basically being that you pick something that's really annoyingly simple, like playing the same note, in order to work on something that's complicated. Like what kinds of things? Well, you can work on like releasing tension in your body. If that's something you've been practicing with your teacher, holding out a long tone while you kind of scan your body and seek opportunities for you to relax tension in certain places. Also working on intonation. So if you're a beginner, that might mean at first just working to center the needle. But then as you get more advanced, maybe moving away from that and working just with a drone. So like if you're playing a scale, just droning the tonic note or the home bass note, so that you're actually learning how to adjust those pitches and that intonation within that specific key. Otherwise, we kind of always rely on this visual cue, which is good for developing muscle memory, but not so great for teaching us how to play in tune in a real life situation. I'm going to use a pattern today for my long tones that comes from the Joseph Singer Embouchure Building for French Horn book, and it's this pattern. It's a half note and a half rest, repeated, and then 8 counts of a long note. And we're going to use that, and we're going to play up 1 octave of, let's do the C scale together. So I'll play C, half rest, C, half rest, and then 2 whole notes tied together on a C. Then I move up to D. What I'm going to do today is put my metronome on 60. And I am also going to turn my tuner on. I'm going to put this right here, and let's do this together. You can use any key you want, really. And let's see if we can do this together. So here's middle C to start. And 1, 2, ready. To D, and ready. our pattern today with set rhythm and also a metronome, it is beneficial at times to actually just try to do long tones without any of those restrictions, especially I find if you're working on just kind of seeking opportunities to release the tension in your body, it can be helpful just to play open-ended long notes. So I hope that kind of opens up some ideas about breathing and also ideas for playing long tones. So the next thing I want to do with you is harmonic series lip slurs. And the first thing is you have to understand what the harmonic series is, which basically just helps us understand why we can play all the pitches that we possibly can on a brass instrument without changing a valve. And the harmonic series is the repeating pattern of notes that happens by vibrating the air at different speeds without changing the length of the tubing. So if I want to change the length, nowadays I can just press a valve. In the olden days, I would actually have to have a little removable tuning slide, basically, or crook, because none of this stuff existed in the middle. So it helps us with two things. The first thing is it's super helpful for helping us improve our accuracy by understanding where all of these partials are and how they relate to one another. And the second thing is it helps us improve our flexibility and the quality of our slurs. I made a brief reference earlier to how when I'm playing intervals, I want to always feel like I'm connecting them with buzz and air or sliding across the partials that I don't want to hear rather than totally skipping across them. It makes the motion more fluid, it makes it more controllable, and the harmonic series is basically how I practice that. It's how I learn how to do that. So the pattern that I'm going to play with you today is by Paul Bassler from a book called Horn WARMUP. And all of the notes in the harmonic series that are encompassed in this basic pattern start on middle C, and they go C, E, G, out of tune B flat, third space C, D, E, top line F sharp, it's out of tune, and then the G that is just on top of the staff. And what I'm gonna do is, I've modified this slightly. I'm gonna start by undulating between each next note in the harmonic series. So the first pattern I play will be C, E, C, and then C, E, G, E, C, adding one note in the harmonic series on as I progress. And when I get to the end, there's a fun little run up the harmonic series with a little bit of an undulation between the G and F sharp at the very top that I like to do, which is a good way for you to start kind of practicing the idea of what a lip trill feels like. So this is a little bit tough to do together because occasionally I'm gonna have to breathe, which interrupts the rhythm, and you're gonna have to breathe too. So let's see if we can just jump back on if we stop or if we get off, and do your best. So everything we play right now is gonna be open. We're going to use the chromatic valve series, which basically takes the instrument from being as short as it can be to as long as it can be incrementally. And that pattern is open, 2, 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 1, 3, and then all three. So within this exercise, everything I play for now is all going to be open, no valve changes whatsoever. Let's try this together. So here's 1, and 2, and ready. progress in the chromatic valve series. I'm going to play the exact same pattern, just on second valve. It's going to sound like it's down a half step, and then it'll sound down another half step when I do it on first valve, etc. Things that I'm listening for on this specifically. I want to feel like I'm bending the partials one into the next, rather than aggressively shifting. It's better to hear the bending, and also I want to try to keep the volume or the loudness of all of the notes, including in between the notes, while the bending is happening, the same. If it sounds like somebody's constantly adjusting your car stereo volume, then that means what you're doing with your air is huffing rather than blowing straight through. And that's something that we want to be very careful about on this. Now, we're going to do second valve, but we're going to alter it a little. So you remember the pattern. This is a concert E or a middle B natural. And what I want to do now is I want to just do it on the mouthpiece, because specifically what you should be listening for when you do this is that you got to buzz the bottom note correctly, and you have to buzz the top note correctly. But actually everything else that I play in between, I want it to be a total smear. I don't want to be able to discern any pitches in between, knowing that the physics of the horn will make the harmonic series notes speak for me. So in order to keep me on track and make sure my pitch doesn't drift, I'm going to buzz a middle B. So I'm going to put on a concert E. And let's try this together. It's going to sound strange. So for me, this is basically what we're going for. When you put that back on the horn, I guarantee you it's going to give you beautiful, more even slurs. So experiment with these off of the instrument by simply buzzing sirens as well. For now, let's play that second valve pattern together. So here's 2, and ready. Do first valve together now. If you watch yourself do this in front of a mirror, which is a really helpful practice tool, you want to make sure all the motions that you see in your face are really fluid and never chewy or jerky or abrupt. So keep an eye on that. Let's try first valve. 2, and ready. is. This is technically the A below middle C. So 2 and ready and. Let's continue with 2-3, which is technically A flat below middle C. Here we go. 2 and ready. Here's 1 plus 3, 2, and ready. The last one, all 3. 1 and 2 and ready. So while these exercises are really great at getting you to slur in the middle upper register and getting you to expand your register upward, I like to use these with my students for that purpose as well. There are also ones that we can do to practice pulling in the lower register. I use a simple pattern that starts on middle C, dips down to the G below, and then the pedal C below that. And I play that pattern on the chromatic valve series the same way. Open, 2, 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 1, 3, and all 3. The purpose of this is not speed, but more continuity. Continuity with sound quality, continuity with dynamic, so that I'm not getting softer or louder between the notes or on certain notes more so than others. And also, I try to bend the notes as far as I can before they actually break into the next partial. So we'll do that together. So here's middle C. Second valve. First valve. One and two. Two and three. One and three. To maintain quality of sound, there was a little bit of shifting with the jaw that has to happen. In other words, the alignment of the teeth. As you go lower, you will notice that in order to stay anchored on the bottom teeth actually start to slide a little bit further forward, almost aligned with, or in some cases in the really low register, perhaps even slightly in front of the top teeth. There's always space between, so keep the space between, that's important. Also making sure that I'm blowing really big, fat, warm, aggressive air. If the sound for you starts to get stuffy as you get near about an octave below middle C, as you start dipping down, that's an indicator that, one, you may not be using enough air, but also, two, your tongue might be in a vowel shape that's too small, like E or oo. And in the low register, in order to slow down the speed of the air, we need to think more like we did with our inhalation breath. Oh, here's the change. It sounds like a didgeridoo, but all I'm doing is saying E, O. Again, only ever manipulating the front part of your tongue. So you can mess around with those and see if you can open up your low register. The last activity I want to do with you is a major scale pattern that I really enjoy. It's good, again, for fluidity and flexibility, and it feels like I'm kind of carrying over some of those concepts from my harmonic series, Lip Slurs. I play my major scale in 2 octaves as even eighth notes, all slurred, and I'm actually going to start in the middle of that 2-octave pattern. So we'll start on a middle C, and I'm going to play up an octave and then down 2 octaves and then back to the starting note. The reason I do this, again, is flexibility and fluidity, and it also makes me cross off over any potential breaks that I have in the instrument and helps me learn how to navigate those with my air. So I am going to set my metronome on quarter note equals 66, and let's give that a shot. So we're starting with our C scale, and then we're going to ascend chromatically and do a few of these together. So 1, 2, and ready. Now we'll go to C sharp or D flat. 1, 2, ready. D, 1, 2, ready? E flat, 1, 2, ready? E natural, 1, 2, ready? F, 2, ready? F sharp or G flat, depending on how you like to think about it. 1, 2, ready? G, 1, 2, ready? A flat, 2, ready? I wanted to briefly stop just to note that if it feels like these scales are starting to get a little bit high for you, that you can also try to play along and drop them down the octave. So rather than starting, we're going to play the A scale in a moment, on second space A and going up, you could try to start on the A that's just below middle C, and then see if you can experiment getting down into the lower register just a little bit. So let's get our metronome going again at 66, and let's finish these last few scales. So A scale, 1 and 2 and ready. Here's B flat, and 1 and 2 and ready. Here's B natural, 1 and 2 and ready. C, 1 and 2 and ready. So typically, I personally like to play this pattern every single day, and I will continue upwards as high as I can get with my face feeling comfortable. So usually I get around like a D or an E flat, and then sometimes I try to continue on. And then what I do to make sure I cover the full register of the horn as I go back to middle C, and I start doing them until I descend, and I get down at least where my bottom note is going to be pedal C 2 octaves below middle C. I would encourage you just to kind of see how high you can get with these and how low you can get with these. Work from the middle out, and what you'll find is over time you kind of carry that good playing that you have in the comfortable register, and it will start to expand along with you. I also like to play my scales articulated in eighth note patterns. And so I make that a part of my fundamental session every day too. Of course, if you don't have time and you're just having to do a quick warm up, say before band class or before a rehearsal, and you don't have an hour or so to devote to doing an entire session, you kind of just pick and choose what feels good to you. Remember, the purpose of a warm-up is just to make you feel good. So through your experimenting and using classes like this in order to try different exercises, you'll mix and match what feels good for you. And no matter who you meet, everybody's going to have a slightly different warm-up. At this point in my fundamental warm-up session, if I have a lot of time, I would start doing different exercises like working on my lip trills. I try to practice those every day. Also just doing multiple tonguing. There's a really cool exercise that I like to do with my private students. I have several students preparing the Atlanta Symphony Youth Orchestra audition right now, and they're all learning the Mendelssohn 3 third horn excerpt, which is pretty challenging and requires double tonguing. So for the students who've never double tongued before, I have them doing what are called minute drills. Minute drills are where you basically set a timer for a minute on your phone. You pick a tempo on your metronome where you can be successful. Even if it's really slow, it doesn't matter. So if you've never done multiple tonguing before, you know, you're just basically saying like T, K, T, K. I would go slow. T, K, T, K, T, K, T, K, T, K. And you could do that for an entire minute without stopping. You'll have to take breaths occasionally. It's not going to sound good the first time you do it. It just never does. But what you find is that the longer you do it, you're able to get it faster. You're able to be more consistent. So that's another good thing that you can work on every day. So I hope that you feel these have been helpful tips for you, and you might try incorporating some of them into your own practice sessions, especially now that we have so much time on our hands. Thank you, and my contact information is on the KSU Music website at musicksu.com. If you have questions, I hope you'll feel free to reach out, send me an email. I would be happy to hear from you. Thank you.